Hello, everyone. Welcome to Racial and Social Justice Beyond the Dome. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Dan Yu, and here with Lily Crawford, who joins from the Executive Board of the Notre Dame Club of Pittsburgh and is the Young Alumni and Career Connections Coordinator for the club. May is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and tonight we welcome Dr. Michel Hockx. Dr. Hockx is professor of Chinese literature in the Department of East Asian Studies and Cultures and the director of the Liu Institute for Asia and Asian Studies in the Keough School of Global Affairs. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So I know I just gave a very short bio of what you're doing now, but I'd love to hear from you. Tell us where you're from and how did you get interested in Chinese language and culture?
Sure. So I was originally from the Netherlands. So I was born there in 1964 and grew up there. And as I was in a Catholic family, and I was the youngest of four brothers. And as I was in high school, it was looking as if I was probably going to make it to university. So I was also the first in the family to go to university. And the way the university system works in the Netherlands and in many European countries is that you just choose one subject and you study that subject for 4 years. And I really loved languages, and I just thought, well, I want to study the most interesting and difficult language I can think of. And so I thought of Chinese, and this was sort of 1981, 82, and China was starting to open up. And I met some people who'd sort of gone on from my high school to study Chinese and had been to China, and I just thought that was really interesting. So I went to my parents and I said, well, I think I want to go and study Chinese. And I guess that probably wasn't what they had in mind for the first ever child to go to university, but they were pretty open-minded about it. And in the end, they said, well, we'll support you and try it out for 1 year. Then if you change your mind after 1 year, we'll support you to switch to something else. And but yeah, after 1 year, I was top of my class. I absolutely loved it, and I the rest is history, as they say. I just continued from there on.
So after undergraduate, you said you went to you told me that you went to China, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So there was, at the time, there was an exchange program between Holland and China, where China would send 20 students a year to Holland, and Holland would send 20 students a year to China. And I mean, they could be students in whatever field, but the Dutch, they tended to send mainly language students to China. So I applied for that program towards the end of my 4th year as an undergraduate. So in those days, the Dutch university program was 4 years, but you could take 6 years to finish it. So instead of graduating after 4 years, I applied for that program, and I got in. And I was so this was 1986. I was sent to the Liaoning University in Shenyang in the northeast of China, in what we used to call Manchuria. So it's and Shenyang is a major city, still is a major city, was a major city then as well, but it's not one that's frequently visited by Western and tourists or anything. So I was part of a very small group of Western students there in a city of millions.
So you go to China as like this foreign invader, right? And so the Caucasian person in China, you must have been a curiosity to the locals.
Yeah. So in addition to being Caucasian, I'm also 6'4". So it's fair to say that, and 1986, China was a different country than what it is now. So it's fair to say that I was a bit of a curiosity, and I was, whenever I ventured outside, my dorm, I would have people, following me around, staring at me, discussing the size of my nose, and looking at pretty much. I remember situations where I was in a department store to buy a pen, and I had about 50 people standing around me discussing how I was buying the pen, and it's yeah, it's great at first. I mean, of course, because you want to be able to talk to people and meet people, and you're enjoying the attention. I mean, as the year progresses, at some point, I mean, it did become quite intimidating, right? I mean, it's not an aggressive kind of racism, but it's a kind of discrimination that you constantly feel that you're being treated as someone who's different because of the way you look, and there's just no escaping from that. But what I also learned was, that there actually was a way to escape from that, because although I wasn't just different because of my race, I was also different because of my socioeconomic status. The fact that I had a hard currency scholarship, and I could just, if I wanted to get away from it all, I could just walk into a luxury hotel, even if I looked terrible in a sweaty t-shirt and torn jeans. I could just walk into that hotel, and they would not allow Chinese people in, even if they were wearing three-piece suits, right? So, and then I could just sit there for a few hours and drink coffee and pretend I wasn't there, I wasn't in China. So it was, I guess, in retrospect, that was my first introduction to the notion of intersectionality, right? That it's never just about race, it's also about class and economic status and gender and all these things, and they get mixed up in really funny ways sometimes.
Right, and then also has to do with the currency. Back then, right, there were two currencies.
Yes, there were two currencies. So as a foreigner, you exchange your US dollars or whatever into what they call the foreign exchange certificates, and then you could spend that money in dedicated stores and hotels and things, or you could try and exchange it on the black market. And and you had to pay double for everything, but then you would often be able to buy things that Chinese people themselves didn't have access to. So it was a double economy. It's very strange. And I must say, I prefer the way things are now. I mean, it's I draw less attention. I have no more privileges, or very few privileges, but I mean, for me, that's a nicer way now of being in China than it was then. But I guess it taught me something about, discrimination and being different, and that's through that experience, which is maybe not all white people have that experience, maybe. So it's I'm happy that I had that experience.
Yeah. It's the other shoe, right? So you're feeling it, but then you're also observing how they treat their own citizens, right? So there's that dichotomy, right? And it's not something that we experience here in the States in some respects. But then there are certain groups in the States that do feel that too, right? So so now, after your time in China, then you went back to the Netherlands.
Right. That's right. So I went back to the Netherlands and then graduated as I was supposed to, and then for a brief period of time I worked in a government office that actually dealt with diversity and within the government employment. So that's another experience to do with the way different groups were being treated, in this case in the Netherlands. And then after about 6 months of doing that, I got a call from one of my professors saying that I could apply for a scholarship to do a PhD, and so went back to university, did a PhD, did a postdoc, and became a specialized academic in the field of modern Chinese literature.
So now this is during this time is where you met your wife. Is that correct? Like you met your wife in grad school. And that's story, right?
We met in 1991. So I was doing my PhD and she was an undergraduate. So she was, she's probably listening, so I should probably lower my voice. But so she's from China, and she was in secondary school, in sort of middle school and high school, she was in a boarding school that focused on foreign languages. There were 6 schools like that in China in the 80s, where kids who were good at languages would be completely immersed for 6 years in either English or French or German or Japanese or Russian, I think. So she was totally immersed in English for 6 years, and then when she was 18, she was selected by the Ministry of Education. They were looking for people to send out to different European countries to learn the smaller European languages. So they were recruiting these kids who were already good in English or French or German and sending them out to places like, Denmark and Portugal and so the Netherlands. And so she was sent to the same university where I was doing my PhD. So she was in the Dutch department, I was in the Chinese department. And that's how we met. So because we had some mutual friends, and then we met up and we started speaking a mixture of Dutch and Chinese, and and that's what we're still doing now.
So you still speak a sort of Chinglish Dutch, it's like combination. It's got to be.
Because the other thing is, after I finished my postdoc, I then got a job in England at the University of London, and Helen, my wife, got a job there as well. So then we actually spent 20 years living in London. So, and her English, which was already fluent because of that high school that she went to, then became even more fluent then. So that English, Dutch, Chinese is sort of, we sometimes we use 3 languages in one sentence. It drives our son crazy, but but that's just some weird habit that we've developed. Yeah,
that's very funny. So then, so you're in London, and you have your PhD, and so what were you doing in London?
So I was teaching Chinese literature and language at a place known as SOAS, SOAS, which stands for School of Oriental and African Studies, which is a unique university that is very small and is completely dedicated to the study of Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. So they have departments like any other university. They have, the law department, the economics, political science, anthropology, whatever. But all the faculty that teach in those departments do research on either Asia or Africa or the Middle East. So it's completely sort of non-Eurocentric. Well, it's devoted to parts of the world that are not Europe and not the US, or not America. And so I was in the Chinese language and literature program, teaching mainly literature and a little bit of language as well. And I was there for 20 years. The last 3 years, by then I was a full professor, and I was, one of the people who'd been there for a very long time, and I knew pretty much everybody who was working on China in all the different departments. And so I was given the opportunity to set up a China Institute, which would organize activities that would be of benefit to that whole community of China scholars across the different departments, and that would also be of benefit to alumni and to the media and to the business community, and sort of translate the academic knowledge into sort of broader, more practical knowledge and make it available to the outside world. So we did a lot of events, and I did a lot of traveling, and that was the last 3 years I was in London. That's what I did, and then I realized that maybe is something I'm good at and I wanted to do more of. So, and that's how Notre Dame came in. Yeah.
So how you came to Notre Dame was a bit of happenstance and almost like the luck of the Irish, right?
Yeah, it's a crazy story. So I became director of this China Institute in London in 2013. And around the same time, maybe a little bit later, I did see an advertisement from Notre Dame that they were looking for a director for the Liu Institute. But I just started being a director of this China Institute. So I thought, well, it looks interesting, but I probably shouldn't be applying for it because I'm, just started this other job. but then in the summer of, I think it was 2014, my wife and son and I, we went on a trip to the US. So we went to Yellowstone Park, and we had a really wonderful holiday where we started out in Yellowstone, and then we drove down to Grand Teton, and then to Salt Lake City, and then we drove. I don't think I've ever driven more in my life. Right? We drove about 1,000 miles, if not more, and ended up eventually in Boulder, Colorado, where there was a couple of scholars of Chinese literature who I'd known for a long time, and who had actually just retired from Notre Dame. So, and so we stayed at their house, and one day, we were having breakfast, and they said, "Hey, Michel, aren't you a Catholic?" I said, "Yeah, I'm Catholic." And what about it? And they said, "Well, did you know that the University of Notre Dame is looking for a director for their Asia Institute?" And I said, "Well, I saw the ad, but it was a long time ago. Do you mean they haven't found anyone yet?" And they said, "No, they haven't found anyone. You would be perfect for that job." And then I said, "Well, okay, that's I'm interested." And then so they called Scott Appleby, who by then had was setting up the Keough School and was leading the search for director of the Leo Institute. And then Scott Appleby got in touch with me, and then we had a few conversations on the phone, and then I visited Notre Dame in early 2015, did an interview, presented myself, then visited again with my family in the summer of 2015, and then eventually moved here in the summer of 2016. So it was a long process, but and quite amazing, as you say. There was quite a lot of luck was involved in it. Yeah.
That's incredible. I mean, by chance, that you're kind of in that same time frame with the people that lived in Boulder. Yeah. I mean, that's the Notre Dame network in action, and it's definitely being in the right place at the right time. So now you come to South Bend from London, right? I mean, culture shock, but then you are director of the institute, and you must have a lot of interaction with alumni and trustees and all the external parties as well, right? I mean, it comes with the job.
Right? Yeah, I mean I at least that's how I interpreted the job. I mean, from the beginning, it was pretty clear to me that there's a reason why it's called the Leo Institute for Asia and Asian Studies, right? So Asian Studies is the academic part, but it's not just about that. It's also just about having the university engage more with Asia, making the university better known in Asia. I mean, and just trying to create those connections, and also making sure that people in the university know and students know more about Asia as well. So, I mean, right from the start, I thought it was my job to sort of spread that message, not just in South Bend or in our campus, but as widely as possible. So I started traveling. I mean, one of the reasons I was so interested in the job was because it was not just Chinese studies, it was Asian studies. So I was able to broaden my own horizons as well. I visited India my second year. Notre Dame has a center in Mumbai, and I went there, and I went to Delhi as well and visited universities there. And then I visited the center in Hong Kong, visited the Gateway in Beijing, and everywhere I went, I met with alumni, and that was really a very, very interesting, a very nice part of the job, that to speak to Notre Dame alumni who were based in Asia and who were so delighted to hear that Notre Dame was actually starting to take more of an interest in Asia, and that because that wasn't always the case, of course.
So it's very much of an awareness campaign that you've been really working on for 5 years, and how's the progress been around that?
I think progress has been pretty good. I mean, it's on the academic side, there have been a lot of new faculty appointments. So just in the last 5 years, I think there have been 15 new appointments of faculty that do research on Asia, mainly on China or India, but some other parts of Asia as well. The institute has certainly become much better known on campus than it was before. I mean, partly because we have a really good location now inside the Keough school, but also because we've just been so very active in terms of organizing events, disseminating information, also running more and more courses, gathering information about courses that are being taught on campus that have something to do with Asia, and putting that information in one place so that students can find out about it. And and the numbers are going up every year. I mean, we have, in the 5 years that I've been here, we've sort of doubled the number of courses on Asia and doubled the number of students on those courses, right? And it doesn't mean the institute is teaching all those courses, but we're like a aggregator of all the information, and I always say we're like the conduit, right? We sort of the information comes in on one side, and people who want to get to the information, they come on the other side, and we sort of bring them together. So I think that's gone really well. And then this past year, because all we did was online, all of a sudden we had all the events we were doing, all of a sudden we had audiences from all over the world, right? So 2 years ago, we were delighted that we had all these in-person events that for the first time ever, we had more than 60 people attending every single in-person event we organized. That was 2 years ago. Yeah. This past year, because all our events were online, 60 was nothing. We regularly had 100 or more, and they were literally from all over the world, including many, many of our alumni. So that's really been a breakthrough. And I think, the sky is the limit as far as I'm concerned.
Right. And it's great that we have this technology that can create instant scale, right? And just like the show, I mean, it's it gets viewed hundreds of times, right? So and sometimes we'll have guests from we've had guests from all over the country, right? And actually even overseas. And so but now I'd like to pivot a little bit, right? So over the past year and a half, with the uptick in anti-Asian rhetoric, sentiment, and especially anti-Asian violence and hate, what has Notre Dame and the Liu done to create that discussion, right, and awareness?
Yeah. So we, when this past academic year started, we were aware of the fact that it was exactly 10 years ago that the Liu family started to, or gave the gift that eventually led to the setting up of the Liu Institute. So, and the Liu family is a Asian American family from California, and this year we had already planned to do something this year so that we could focus on the Asian American community and celebrate their achievements, and also show some of the expertise we have at Notre Dame among faculty who are interested in Asian American communities. So, but of course, what we hadn't expected was that things would take such a negative turn in terms of what the Asian American community was subjected to. So as it happened, then the first event we organized was a lecture by Professor Jennifer Huynh, who is in Asian American Studies, teaches in our American Studies program, is also a fellow of the Liu Institute, and she chose to give a lecture on the topic of the so-called Kung Flu, and the language used, especially in the media, to sort of stigmatize Asian and Asian American people in relation to the pandemic. So she was showing examples how even sort of progressive media were often, when they were discussing things like wearing face masks, etc., they were always linking that to images of Asian people, right? Even if the story wasn't about Asia at all, if it was about wearing face masks in in New York or
Right.
in Pittsburgh, right? They would still have an Asian person with a mask on a picture. And then she compared that to the Chinese language newspapers that you can buy in the US, and showed how different they were in the way they portrayed the pandemic, right? So so right from the start, actually, our focus on Asian America became a focus on Asian hate and anti-Asian discrimination. We then had a very big event in February, which is now going to become an annual event. We call it the Asian American Distinguished Speakers Series. And so the first event in that series, we had Ai-jen Poo, who is one of the founders of the National Domestic Workers Alliance. It's this really, really impressive Asian American woman who's done so much good work to support domestic workers, many of whom are Asian, many of whom are female. She did an online lecture where she was in conversation with our wonderful new provost, Marilyn Miranda. So that, you can still watch that on our YouTube channel. That was an amazing conversation. She then also did an online meeting with a group of students who were interested in race and gender and labor and all these issues. And she spent like an hour with those students talking about all kinds of things. And then she had a meeting with the Liu family, and it was a truly, truly amazing event. And it really, and again, the focus was very much on sort of the difficulties that Asian American community is experiencing. And then the Atlanta shootings happened, and then we reacted to that with two events where we were no longer the sole organizer by that time. Gender studies, human rights, history, peace studies. I mean, everybody wanted to work together to respond to that. We had two events in April. One that was featured 5 Asian women, 3 of them faculty, 3 of them graduate students, sorry, 6 people, right? So I think the first time that Notre Dame ever had a panel that consisted only of Asian women, and they spoke about their own experiences, they spoke about their anger, their fear, and then it was really impressive. And then a few weeks later, we had a second event where we had a group of scholars talking about sort of the history of discrimination of Asian Americans, the history of the label Asian American, model minority, all these ideas, and also looking at things, community organizations that are trying to fight Asian hate, and so a very informative panel. So yeah, almost inadvertently, that something that was going to be our focus as a kind of celebration actually became our focus more as a form of activism and speaking out and calling attention to what's happening with the Asian American community and in general with Asian people in the US and not just in the US as well. So
yeah, so that must have been such a terrific just series, and I'm glad that it's all recorded to the audience and our listeners or watchers, that they can go back to it. And it must have been pretty cathartic, right, for the participants to be part of it. But what I noticed, so the difference between how the Liu Institute and the other departments tackled these issues, right? There seemed to be a stark difference between taking these issues head on, right, and then what Notre Dame's kind of overall statement to address the issue. There seemed to be this almost it's not that they ignored it, but there was a definite split in how it was approached.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was something of a delay in response from the president's office. I mean, I think president's office responded directly to the Atlanta shootings by obviously expressing its concern and for the victims, but it wasn't immediately linked to the victim's race, right? So, and that's unfortunate, and maybe that shouldn't have happened. Others, like Leo Institute, did issue a statement. Many other universities also issued a statement. The Institute also helped to organize a prayer service for the victims. So a lot of things were happening, and maybe the president's office sort of missed the opportunity initially for whatever reason. I mean, I can only guess, obviously, but now that all's been said and done, I mean, I am very happy that the president's office then chose to make a very impressive statement on May the 1st to not only acknowledge the racist violence against victims in Atlanta and also in Indianapolis and also in Fort Wayne, but also to acknowledge and to celebrate AAPI Heritage Month, which I don't think had ever been done before at Notre Dame. So in the end, I think that's a very wonderful result. And if we can continue to celebrate that month every single year, then I think that would be wonderful. And I have to say, just looking around campus for the past month, I mean, pretty much every unit on campus, even the IT department where my wife works, I mean, they have been organizing events, trying to learn more about Asian American and Pacific Islander heritage, and inviting people to speak and having discussions about, diversity, inclusion, inclusivity. What does it mean? What is a microaggression, and how it's really, I've never seen so many people on campus all at the same time having these conversations. And it's been ongoing all year. I mean, it started with, of course, with Black Lives Matter, and now I think it's very much also focused on the AAPI community. So it's you'd expect it from Notre Dame, and I think Notre Dame always has its heart in the right place. But I think it's nice to actually see it also coming out now and becoming sort of truly inclusive in terms of what is being discussed and which communities are being included in the conversation. So,
well, that's it's great that the rest of the university, staff, right, not just students and faculty, right, that there is this conversation being had that's being had, and I think a lot of people, they just need to have a safe space, right, for them, right? So Caucasian people or African American people, that they can have a safe space to ask these questions that they may feel embarrassed to ask before, right? And so being that force, as we call it, the force for good, right? So having that space for them, right, is also being inclusive, right? Inclusivity goes the other way too, I think. So and it's great that that you're part of the leadership to continue to expand these racial justice discussions or social justice discussions. And next month we Pride Month, so and it continues. And
I should mention, I mean, I have wonderful Asian and Asian American colleagues in the Institute who educate me in this aspect as well, and who have very much been leading the Institute response to this, and I learn from them, and I do my best to make myself useful in any way that I can.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I mean, it's this is it's a team effort, right? So it has to be a team effort for everyone to get involved, and not just Asian American AAPI issues, but all diversity, inclusion, right? So, and so how can you continue to push the limits of the Leo Institute and to create more awareness around diversity?
So one thing I want to focus on over the coming years is diversity of the curriculum, because I think that's something that we're well placed to sort of start working on that, right? So, I mean, there are other parts of the university that are talking about diversity in terms of hiring, and those discussions are happening. But But looking at the Notre Dame curriculum, especially the core curriculum that every student has to study, I mean, there is nothing in the core curriculum that says you need to learn anything about any other culture, right? You can, but you don't have to, right? And you can come to the Leo Institute, you can do a minor in Asian studies, or you can go to East Asian languages, you can even major in Chinese or Japanese or Korean, but if you major in, say, art history, then there isn't a single course about Asian art, right? If you major in music, there's nothing about Asian music, right? If you major in liberal studies, which is a big program, right, you have to take all these sort of great books courses, right? There's like, I think, 18 credits worth of great books courses. They read 60 great books, and they're all from the West, except for maybe 2 or 3 of them, right? So that's what I hope to be targeting, right? That these very sort of, for lack of a better word, Eurocentric programs that are part of the curriculum of Notre Dame and that sort of form the brand of Notre Dame, that these programs become more inclusive, that they start thinking about, well, how can we teach art history or music or liberal studies, and actually make sure that it brings in, first of all, the different cultures of the United States, but also, different parts of the world and different traditions. I think and to make that compulsory, right? Or to make that, because otherwise, what are we doing, right?
Yeah, well, access is a tough thing, right? Because you need faculty, right? You've got to expand the faculty. You've doubled the faculty, right? Just in lieu.
Right.
But so Asian studies is not a major yet.
No, it's not a major, and it probably won't be. I mean, some of the languages are majors, but but I guess sort of the point is that, because of course it's really important to have diversity in hiring, and I really, really hope that we'll be hiring more Asian Americans and especially also more African American faculty, because we have only a very small percentage of African American faculty and staff. But if they're still going to be teaching the same Eurocentric curriculum, right, then you still haven't solved the problem, right? So I'm hoping that if people want to learn about Asia, that doing Asian studies isn't the only way for people to learn something about Asia. I mean, we can keep growing the Asian studies program. We can do that. We can have more and more courses on Asia, but I would like to see Asia also as part of sort of general courses that deal with larger themes or topics or bigger disciplines. I mean, that's what I would really like to see happening.
Right. And so now there's the Moreau seminar, right, in the freshman year of studies, right? So that's kind of it's the grab bag of classes, right? So you don't know what you're going to get. So is there an Asian studies course in that?
Not that I'm aware of. No, not that I'm aware of. So so these are, and even if Asia is mentioned, then still, I mean, the question is, how is it mentioned? Does the person teaching it actually know something about it? It's really not that unusual, I think, if you look at other universities, to have sort of 1 or 2 Asia specialists in every single department. I mean, I think that's pretty common these days. So I don't see why Notre Dame should not do that. And then some departments have done that. I mean, history now has 2 China historians and 1 India historian. Still not a lot, but those are all people that were hired in the past 5 or 6 years, right? Political science has now 3 or 4 China people, but still nobody who works on India. The global affairs, of course, Keough School does have substantial number of people who work on Asia, and that's what's definitely made a difference. But I also don't want global affairs to be, the ghetto of everything that is not European or Eurocentric. But it's still not good enough. So
right. So then I'm going to date myself here, but when I was in undergrad, I remember taking world religions was one way to learn about Asia. I took that as one of my theology classes, and
Uh-huh.
then I was in the business school, so there wasn't really too much opportunity to fit in something in the College of Arts and Letters, right? So, but I did take a Japanese business practices
Oh,
class in the business school, and I mean, it was a great class, but there were things like, you know, if you hold your business card a certain way, and I thought, you know, those are cute things, but did it really get into the deep topics?
yeah,
It did not, right? So,
yeah,
but then now with there's obviously hiring a faculty, but then there's budget, right? There's all of these there's all these concerns around where do you strategically spend your money,
yeah,
right? And which ones are actually going to drive then revenue, right, with students, right? Where's the
yeah. So it's a bit of a, chicken and egg questions, like, so people don't get hired because people are worried that these classes might not attract students, but then if you don't tell the students they have to take those classes, then it's never going to happen. I mean, I'll give you a good example of something we're doing, which I'm actually pretty proud of, is that Notre Dame has this very successful program in London. A lot of people go to London for a semester, and they can do all kinds of courses in London, and many of them sort of tick the boxes for the core curriculum and whatever majors and minors they're taking. And so the London Gateway has never taught a course about Asia. And I lived in London for 20 years. There is a really big Asian community in London. And England, as the UK as a country has a bit of a history with Asia as
yeah,
well. So the museums, the art galleries, I mean, everything. There is so much Asia in London, and so to spend a semester in London and not to learn about Asia is just really it's just crazy. And so we have actually persuaded the London Gateway that as of spring 2022, they will start teaching at least one course on Asia, right? And we are helping them sort of find people who can teach that, and we're making sure that it's designed in such a way that it meets one of the philosophy core curriculum requirements, because everybody has to take their philosophy course, right? So that's an example, right? Why should Asia only be taught at the gateways in Beijing and Hong Kong and Mumbai, right? Why? I mean, we're doing something similar with the Rome Gateway, where we're sort of encouraging people to go to Rome to do research, because the Vatican Library has massive amounts of information about Asia from all the missionaries who over the centuries who've gone to Asia. Right? So it's just an example of how we're sort of trying to have a little bit of Asia in everything that Notre Dame does, and especially in those flagship programs like the London Gateway program, for instance, to just make it normal that wherever you go, you do something at Notre Dame. Asia is a part of that.
so with technology, right, with Zoom, the access can go both ways too, right? So from the Hong Kong or the Shanghai, right, or Beijing, wherever, or Mumbai, right?
Right.
From Rome, it can come back to main campus too.
Yeah, and we had a number of events this past year where we held them at times where they would be convenient for people in Asia to watch them. And we had speakers from Asia. We worked together with the gateways and the centers. We even had one event where we partnered with a university in Shanghai, and we did the whole event in Chinese. And that's again, I don't think that was ever done before at Notre Dame, and that worked really well. So if you do an event with a university in China, you immediately have 200-300 people listening, and so it's and I think that's also part of our mission. I think the Liu family, when they envisioned establishing an institute at Notre Dame, one of the things they had in the back of their mind was that they wanted Notre Dame to be better known in Asia. I mean, So they wanted Asia to be more prominent at Notre Dame, but they also wanted Notre Dame to be better known in Asia, because, I mean, it is true that when you go to Asia and you mention Notre Dame, people don't necessarily know what that is, right? So it's so the university has a fantastic reputation in the US, but it doesn't necessarily have the same reputation outside the US. So that's another piece of the puzzle, also, to try and bring Notre Dame to Asia, to bring Asia to Notre Dame and Notre Dame to Asia.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much. So I'd like to just remind the audience that if you have any questions, please enter them into the chat box. Go to the bottom of your screen, click on the chat box, and please enter your questions there, and we will try to answer them in the Q&A, which will be coming up in just a couple minutes. So, Michel, we'd like to end our shows before Q&A with a speed round of questions here. So just right off the top of your head, this is a little.
I've forgotten all about the speed round. Oh, okay.
Well, if you've watched previous episodes, you might know what some of the questions are, but this I have not prepared you on at all. So here we go. What is a memorable book that you've read?
Possession by A.S. Byatt.
Possession by
A.S. Byatt, B-Y-A-T-T. Yeah.
Okay. And what do you consider a really great accomplishment of yours?
Learning to read Chinese. So I'm still learning, but yeah, I guess I would have to say that. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so what is your favorite ice cream flavor?
Chocolate and chocolate. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Maybe also chocolate.
What is your favorite place on campus?
That is a good question, actually. Don't
say your office.
It's definitely not my office. No, it's that is actually a good question. I'm gonna say the grotto, actually. Yeah.
That's a frequent answer. So, do you have a favorite?
It's mainly because I'm part of a running group and we run on campus. Well, we're allowed to do that again now.
Yeah.
On Sundays, and we run around Notre Dame and then St. Mary's, and then we come back, and then when you get to the grotto, you have to run up that hill, and you've already done 7 or 8 miles, and you're really tired. And then, so that the grotto has that special meaning for me as well. That's
not a good meeting, but
it's about things that move uphill, and you have to make an effort.
There you go. Right. So it's climbing Mount Ararat in a way.
That's right. Yeah. I was looking for the right biblical comparison.
All right. So do you have a favorite cookbook?
No, I don't. I usually just Google it. Yeah.
That's a cookbook right there. If you could have dinner with 3 people, who would that
be? You, of course.
Look at that. Wow, that's a first.
I would like to have dinner with Xi Jinping and tell him a few things that he needs to know. Yeah, who else? Father Hesburgh. It's a shame I've never been able to meet him. Yeah.
Wow, Father Hesburgh would be great. Well, and then do you have a favorite musical artist?
Paul Simon. Yeah, that's that dates me as well. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, I would like to open it up to the audience for any Q&A. Please type in your questions into the chat box. We are here to answer your questions. Well, actually, Dr. Hockx is here to answer your questions. I'm really just the valet, of course. But please enter your questions into the chat box now. And so as we wait for these questions, you must be happy this week. Classes are over, exams are over, right? That's got to be a relief.
It's yes, it is. I mean, and it's weird because Helen, my wife, and I, we talk about that a lot because she works in the Notre Dame IT department. So for her, the idea that, you know, the semester ends and then all of a sudden your whole rhythm changes, that it doesn't really apply to her, right? So, but it is true. I mean, you build up as the semester progresses, just sort of something builds up, and you know, you use a lot of energy, and students as well. I think towards the end you just become really tired, and then when it's over, it's just a massive. It's a sense of relief and also a sense of accomplishment, and especially this year, of course, because of the pandemic, we were doing the semesters without a break, so we started late to avoid the coldest weather and then the flu season. We didn't start until early February, and then we did 15 weeks without a spring break. So I've never in my career have I taught 15 weeks in a row without a break. I mean, that was, you know, and then we had to do it, of course, with social distancing and masking and partially on Zoom, sort of hybrid kind of teaching. So it was a lot more intensive than it usually is. And it was the feeling when I submitted my final grades on Tuesday was one of relief and also one of accomplishment. Yeah, and now, you know, the summer lies ahead of me, and then also I'm getting a sabbatical next semester because I've done my first 5 years, so I will be able to focus on my research, and then come back after that and do another 5 years as director of the Liu Institute, and then someone else can take over after that.
That would be a great tenure and a great way to go, right? So. Now, so this summer, right? Will you be teaching this summer, you know, for the summer semester, or just?
No. So this summer I'll be mainly spending time on preparing for a grant application that we are going to put in next year, because I'll be on sabbatical. So I'm preparing for it now together with, you know, the Institute team. So this opportunity comes around once every 4 years to apply for federal funding to become a national resource center in area studies, in our case, in East Asian studies. And I know that we applied for it 4 years ago. We didn't get it, but we hadn't really expected to get it because Notre Dame had never applied for that. And we were never, you know, a center, you know, of, you know, the same kind of magnitude as other universities. So we were heartened actually by the feedback we got 4 years ago, that a lot of the assessors said, well, we had no idea Notre Dame was doing this, and, you know, you guys are doing good work, and, you know, keep it going. So now, you know, 4 years down the line, we've grown, we've done a lot more, and we've learned a lot. So we're going to try and apply again, and then it's not even about the money. It's not a huge amount of money, but it's about the status of being one of maybe 20 national resource centers in the US. And it also comes with a lot of money for scholarships for students to learn Asian languages, so which would be fantastic. And then so I'm going to, you know, together with my team, we're going to spend a lot of time working on that over the summer, so that we can be in a good position when the call comes out to sort of respond to that straight away.
That's great. Well, as a parent of a Notre Dame student, my daughter's a sophomore, would be a junior, and she's taken a couple of Chinese classes. I want to thank you as a parent for, you know, tackling teaching students during this pandemic. I can't imagine the challenge that must have presented. It is truly an accomplishment, I think, for all of the faculty at Notre Dame and the staff, and all of the rectors, right, that take care of the students on a day-to-day basis. So I as a parent appreciate that very much. Where can people follow you or find you in social media? Like, how can they follow the Liu Institute and your work?
So the Institute, so our website is asia.nd.edu. We also have a mailing list. If people want to subscribe to that, they can write to us. Email address is asia@nd.edu, or just go to our website and you'll find it. The Institute is on Facebook as well, and we have a lot of information that we spread on Facebook, such as the announcement for tonight's event as well, for instance. I personally, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, and I'm on LinkedIn. So if you search for my name with, there is nobody else in the world with my name, I believe. So it's very easy to find. And so yeah, plenty of, and then the Institute, as I said, has a YouTube channel as well. So almost all of the online events we did over the past year. I mean, there were some where the speakers didn't want to be recorded, but most of the events we did over the past year have been recorded and have been added to our YouTube channel, which also has some recordings of in-person events from previous years as well. So it's a pretty good collection of events now that you'll find on our YouTube channel. So just go to YouTube, search for Liu Institute, and you'll find us. Yeah.
That's great. Well, I'm sure all of that content will be part of your grant application, right?
Yes,
The programming
absolutely.
that you guys have been putting together. That's great. That's great. Well, Dr. Michel Hockx, thank you so much for being with us. What a pleasure to have you on our show. Thank you.
Thank you. It's really been wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you very much.
Sure. And thanks to the audience for joining this evening. This has been another episode of Racial and Social Justice Beyond the Dome, technical direction by Lily Crawford. I'm Dan Yu, and this has been a production of the Notre Dame Club of Pittsburgh. Follow us at ND Pit Club on Facebook, Twitter, ndpitclub.com, and Notre Dame Pit Club on Instagram. Thanks again, everyone. Have a good evening, and go Irish. Thank you very much, Dr. Hockx. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.